Welcome to the NFL Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by TheLines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined as always by my guys Mo Nawara in the Midwest and Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. And we are looking at super wild card weekend here as we continue along with our NFL props for you guys on this show. Definitely like and subscribe to that page. We are not going anywhere until football is over. That is for sure. So we will be coming back to you guys during the rest of this postseason in the NFL. Also want you to head to TheLines.com. There is more than enough NFL written content on there for you guys right now about all of these super wild card weekend games. We've got a couple of passing props, rushing props, and receiving props for you guys as we bring you each and every week. So check those out. And you can also head to TheLines.com. I want to make sure to let you know about that odds finder tool. Use that to make sure you're getting the best juice back on all these U.S. sports books, giving us NFL player props this postseason. Let's go ahead and jump right into our first passing prop of the day, Nate and Mr. Dak Prescott.
Yeah, a lot of Cowboys slander out there the way they finished the season, and Dak Prescott, of course, throwing about 13 interceptions in his last 9 games or something like that, all through consecutive pick sixes in the finale. But the thing about interceptions or setting the other team up to score is really they're going to help your yardage prop. They're going to help facilitate negative game flow. And the fact that I have no faith in Mike McCarthy winning playoff games means I think the Cowboys might not be playing from ahead here on Monday night in Tampa. These are the teams that are first and fourth in total pace this season, second and sixth in neutral pace. So I do expect it to be going back and forth here. Brady's prop, of course, much higher at 272. Dak only 246. And, we saw he's capable of throwing for 347 against Philly's top-rated secondary. Tampa Bay, middling secondary once again. And they haven't really been the same kind of run defense in years past where teams aren't even going to try to run on them. But I think that's kind of a misnomer. I think they probably turn up the run defense as we get into the playoffs here. Vita Vea healthy again. And opponents are still producing like 65% of their yards through the air when they're in Tampa Bay. Dallas producing 72% of yards through the air in their last 3 here. And Dak, in his 5 playoff games, he's getting 49 attempts per game, getting 262 yards per game. So Dallas does not necessarily just try to, slow it down and ground and pound with Zeke here. And I don't think that's really the effective way to attack this Bucs defense anyway.
Yeah, I was surprised how low this number was. This is a spot where the total was a bit higher than I expected, but I'm also expecting both offenses to open it up a little bit in the second half. And I don't know if the Cowboys are really going to be able to run the ball here. I know the Bucs run defense hasn't been as strong as it has been in years past, but Vita Vea was hurt for a lot of the season, and I think he's good and in there now. So I'm expecting a better performance from them. Overall, their defense is just getting healthier. So even though I do kind of lean to the under here, I was surprised this number was this low. So I definitely understand why somebody would want to take the over. I would definitely lean that way on this one. But a lot of quarterback totals that I thought were just a little bit low than I expected this week.
Yeah, well, I mean, for Dak, it's also about not throwing picks. I know that doesn't necessarily impact his yardage, but I think he will have the ability to throw into a few more tight windows. It's interesting you brought up, some of that second half explosion that you can probably expect for maybe the pace to pick up a bit. You've seen the Bucs play at a really, really slow pace as well in the first half. A lot of unders there for those Bucs in the first half, especially with that Todd Bowles defense coming out the way it does. And like you said, getting much healthier. So I still think yardage is a little bit separate from all that stuff. And you're probably still likely to get it, at least in part because of what you're saying, Mo, with the pace of that second half that you can expect in this one. So moving on to your passing prop here, and Mr. Joe Burrow for the Bengals getting back into the postseason, a pretty high number, and I believe you're taking an under on him.
Yeah, back to the well on Joe Burrow unders for me here. It's a game where the total has plummeted. I think it was 43.5 or something when it opened, but as the quarterback picture gets less and less good for the Ravens, the total keeps dropping. It was down to 40.5 last night. I do kind of still think the under is going to come home here. Just it reminds me a little bit of that Titans-Jags game from Week 18, where I think we're just going to see the Ravens D absolutely ball out because they know that's their only shot in this game, is for the defense to come out and kind of put the clamps on this Bengals passing game. And they kind of just did a pretty good job of that, to be honest, when they just played in Cincinnati. Joe Burrow is averaging, a lot of yards similar to this prop number, but he only had 215 yards in that game, and more importantly for me, the efficiency just was not there at all. He was down at like 4.6 yards per attempt. So I think against some of these stronger pass defenses, we are going to get a big number that we can take under on here, and that's what we're seeing. And I also think, if this spread does come home and the Bengals are up big in the second half, they could be running the ball in that spot. They could be killing the clock. It just doesn't seem like it's going to be a very high-scoring environment where Burrow is going to be, having a lot of outcomes that are 300 yards plus. And I think people are just not realizing how good this Ravens defense has been as well. I know they've been facing a lot of bad offenses, but still, DVOA is supposed to account for that. It has them 7th on the season. So, really, they've been pretty much flawless as far as defense goes since week 3. I say pretty much because Trevor Lawrence did kind of blow them up when those two teams played. But other than that, that's really the only big game they've allowed in that time. So, a big number here. I do like the under on Joe Burrow, and I like the game under too.
Which kind of correlates into what I'm talking about for rushing here. Obviously, the immediate rematch. It'll be interesting to see what kind of cat and mouse games these teams played. And the Ravens did not play J.K. Dobbins in Week 18, pretty much just to put him on ice for this one. In his previous 4, he was averaging 99 rushing yards per game at 7 yards per carry. Their offensive line crept up to the number 1 in terms of producing RB yards per carry. And, we saw them, the combination of Gus, Justice Hill, and Kenyon Drake average 4.1 yards per carry against the Bengals last week. Gus Edwards missing practice time with concussion protocol. So Dobbins is probably going to be the feature back. He's probably going to be the featured weapon on offense as the Ravens slow this down. That probably means the Bengals don't get as many opportunities is what Mo's looking at here. And Dobbins, 99 yards per game in 2 matchups against the Steelers, which is a better run defense than the Bengals, 6th in DVOA, I believe, and the Bengals pretty much average in that department. So it's 61.5 rush yards for Dobbins. I would expect him to get at least 15 carries here if the Ravens defense is putting together a good effort here to keep it reasonable. If Tyler Huntley is under center, you got to like it a lot, as Lamar just usually sucks up so much of the rushing production. And if he's not out there, Dobbins should be getting fed a lot.
Yeah, all of this, some correlation going on for sure. I think the thing about the Ravens defense too, the two things we're looking at here, Ravens defense, massive improvements, especially since they got Roquan Smith. Obviously, we know what that did and the way that they've actually decreased the amount of points they're giving up from like 23 a game to roughly 15, I believe, since he got there. You're seeing their pass defense improve a little bit because of Patrick Queen able to sort of play his more free, linebacking role as opposed to necessarily needing to be worried about coverage and attacking the quarterback. So I think there's been a lot of things freed up. Tyler Huntley does look like he's probably going to play in this one, which means offense just sort of stalling all over the place. And even if the Bengals do get out to somewhat of a fast start, even if it is an aerial assault in that sense, you can still expect that to slow down a bit if they do build that pretty big lead that I think we're all expecting without with seeing Lamar on the field there. J.K. Dobbins continues to be a pretty good bet as well at 61.5. How did you feel about Nate's logic there, Mo?
Yeah, I think even though I like the under here, this does make some sense. I think this just 100% just comes down to usage. I think they should hand to J.K. Dobbins off a lot because I'm not inspired by the talent level of these other running backs. And if they do, I think he'll probably go over this number fairly easily. this Cincinnati run defense has been had at times. They're in the middle of the pack in basically every advanced stat. So they're like just fine. And could see some heavy box play from them, though. The Ravens' running back usage has been a little bit like the Chiefs. It's been unpredictable at times. So I think that would be the main concern. But, man, you would think backs against the wall. They would really want to hand off to their actual good running back here.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot more sense for sure. Let's move on to your running back pick here that I think you feel a little bit, I guess you feel super confident about Dalvin Cook and the way that he sort of diminished a bit as this season has gone along. His rushing prop is at 71.5 yards.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there with diminished. It's really been kind of a declining level of production all season for Dalvin. Like, he started off the season very good, and I think just from owning him in multiple fantasy leagues this year and watching him run in some of these spots and just being infuriated at times. Maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I don't know if people realize how like washed Dalvin has looked for the second half of this season. He's probably been one of the worst high volume running backs in the NFL for months now, if not the whole season. I definitely am going to be steering well clear in basically every draft next year. I don't think he looks good at all to the eye test. Lost a lot of explosion, it looks like to me. And I think this number is really reflecting like his kind of season long stats, which include all those big games early on. And I think people are just not understanding how bad he's been lately. And to put a number on it, 55.8 rushing yards per game since week 11. So he's been well under this number on average for multiple months now. And it's a really, really good matchup because the Giants have been atrocious versus the run. Football Outsiders has them as the worst run defense in the NFL. But they do have some things breaking their way health-wise here. Dexter Lawrence coming back, Leonard Williams coming back. Both of those guys have been banged up. Both of them obviously rested when the team basically punted week 18. And then on the other side of the line, you have Brian O'Neill. I believe he's out for the season for the Vikings. He's been one of their best linemen. He's been a standout for years. He's the right tackle. And even with Brian O'Neill in the lineup, the Vikings 25th in adjusted line yards. They just haven't been blocking well at all. I think in particular when I've noticed like short yardage situations that have just been brutal with the Vikings. And I just think they're going to struggle more than they should given how bad the Giants are.
Yeah, I think this game is going to surprise in terms of being kind of more of a slobber knocker than we might expect with the way the Vikings have finished the season, just getting into these ridiculous shootouts. I think their defense might actually come to play. I was interested in Daniel Jones under passing 241, despite the fact that he went for 330 against the Vikes. I mean, they do have Cam Dantzler back at this point. I think that malign defense will come to play, and the Giants probably too. I mean, Daboll has had his team overachieving at every turn, and the fact that they suck against the run. I mean, they suck against the pass too, but they just find ways to overcome those advanced metrics and make them look like they don't matter by just making timely plays. But where I do like overs, I'm going back to the Monday night game in Tampa. Always pretty much good weather there, even in January. And Tom Brady, in the playoffs, gonna lock onto his slot guy, Chris Godwin, I would think. Mike Evans did go nuts in week 17. But he's probably lining up against Trayvon Diggs most of the night here, while Godwin, either on the right side or in the slot, gets Kelvin Joseph or Deron Bland, guys that really struggled against Zay Jones, Christian Kirk a few weeks ago, that really struggled against Devontae Smith. Godwin has the fourth highest slot rate of any receiver this season. He's averaging 10 targets a game and 8 catches in his last 7. That includes, limited usage against Atlanta in the finale. He only played 48% of the snaps at home this season. 10 catches a game, 71 yards per game. So FanDuel gives him at like 2 yards lower right now at 65.5. I think it's 67 most places. He's locked at 6.5 receptions most places with poor odds. I don't really love that, but FanDuel, again, giving nice juice, plus 210 anytime touchdown. And I just think the way Brady likes to look over the middle, and Godwin being one of his favorite guys, I would expect him to perform better than Mike Evans in this matchup.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, especially given kind of a buy low, sell high spot with these two receivers, if you can call it that, just because of the last real game they played. We saw Mike Evans go bananas, but that's been the exception and definitely not the rule of late. Godwin has been dominating targets. That being said, I would definitely be careful with the touchdown one. I don't think he ever really gets red zone targets, but it seems like Brady likes to always throw to his tight ends there. But yeah, the yardage I could definitely see going over here. One thing, if you have a book that lets you fire second half player props, I definitely think there's going to be a lot more passing and offense in the second half of this one. So I would look to that, especially if the Bucks do try to pound the rock early. They could find themselves down a little bit and maybe switch to that no huddle that's actually been working for them, where their regular scripted offense has been absolutely awful this whole season.
And that's a part of what we've been saying, right, in terms of why we expect some second half points in this one, and that's where both these guys, in terms of Evans and Godwin, have been doing the majority of their damage as well. So yeah, I think there's something to be said for that pace being a huge reason you like over, and the anytime touchdown. I mean, yeah, it's a bit more of a crapshoot, but plus 210 in a game where if you think he's going to be getting the yardage, I can see the logic there as well, Nate. And it would require a bit more yardage on the touchdown, I imagine, with those red zone numbers for the Bucks as of late. But let's go to your receiving prop here, Mo, and a guy that I talked about earlier, you talked about earlier, Mr. George Kittle at 40.5 yards. I've actually been hitting him as well to continue to get touchdowns, because he continues to get those to the tune of like 6 in his last 4 weeks with Brock the Rock back there, Brock Lobster, whatever, still looking for his official nickname. But 40.5 yards for George Kittle is definitely low. So tell us why it's too low.
Yeah, I think he's scored in like 5 or 6 straight games or something like that. Also, just getting targets in multiple games in a row, because seems like Brock Purdy is maybe a little more inclined to look his way compared to Jimmy Garoppolo. He definitely started out a little slow this year. Probably frustrated a lot of people who drafted him high in fantasy when kind of Debo and Ayuk were dominating a lot of the targets, but it does seem like he's got more of a rapport with Purdy for whatever reason. And the Seahawks, he torched them last time they played on Thursday night, and that's kind of been the story of the season in some senses for the Seahawks defense. They've been pretty bad limiting opposing tight ends. Dead last in fantasy points allowed, 27th in DVOA allowed, averaging 7.9 for 66.6 is what they allow to tight ends, which is pretty monstrous. The one thing I will say about this game, the weather is looking a bit rough. I know you're a California guy, Josh, so maybe you know better than me, but the weather reports I've seen have not been that clear for that game, so it could be a downpour. I would maybe wait on this one and see if the weather is bad and the number drops, or if the weather is looking somewhat clear and there's not much of an adjustment. I think either way you could see maybe get a little better value a little later on this one.
It's possible, for sure. I mean, it's going to rain. It's been doing that. It's not going to stop raining until like next Tuesday or Wednesday. I haven't played golf in what feels like ages. So yeah, I can attest to all of that. I might still consider, taking the 40.5. I don't know how much lower that can go. If it does get into the 30s, I mean, just keep hitting it. But I would hit it now and then watch it, like you said, Mo. I believe you said on our Discord chat, Mo, just because the odds are what they are now doesn't mean when it gets better you can't put more on it later, right? And so I'm looking at George Kittle for that exact type of thing. Either way, I'm going to be watching, obviously, all of these games as we get into Saturday, Sunday, and we have our Monday night, hopefully, thriller as well. So continue to follow along with us as we are coming back to you guys each and every week of this postseason. Continue to bring you guys these NFL props. And until we see you next, happy betting.